Hey fellow Uncovered True Crime listeners, I'm Cece, the host of a new true crime podcast, Sooner State True Crime. As a born and bred Okie, I'll cover cases based in my wonderful home state of Oklahoma. The term Sooner actually refers to cheaters in the land run, my state's very first true crime. New episodes are released twice a month in Apple Podcasts or most podcast apps, or visit our website, anchor.fm/crimestate to listen now. So come away with me to my crime state on the Sooner State True Crime Podcast, and please stay Sooner safe out there, y'all.
When you think of a scandal, you might recall headlines in papers and accusations made against people with power and money. Back in the 1950s, the definition of a scandal was much different. Back then, especially if you were a woman, being a single parent, going through a divorce, having an affair, or having a child outside of wedlock would often result in you being disowned by your family and community. One woman back in 1956 rose above it all and was described by one of her daughters as being, quote, ahead of her time, unquote. That was until she disappeared after witnessing her boyfriend being shot. This case, despite all its twists and turns, has never been solved. Let's uncover the murder of Thomas Hotard and the disappearance of Audrey Moate. Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of Uncovered True Crime Podcast. My name is Stephanie, and each week we uncover a different unsolved true crime case ranging from missing persons, unsolved murders, Jane and John Does, and suspicious deaths. You can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify and other podcast streaming apps, as well as on YouTube just by searching Uncovered True Crime. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at uncover_pod and on Instagram at uncovertruecrimepod. Before we get started today, I would like to thank Austin at Heart for the lovely review they left me on Apple Podcasts. It was so kind and it really is appreciated. If anyone else would like to review or comment on the podcast, like an episode, subscribe on YouTube, things like that, it really does help me out and it lets me know how you are enjoying the podcast. So please don't be shy, leave a comment, a review and let me know what you think. Without any further ado, let's uncover the unsolved murder of Thomas Hotard and the unsolved disappearance of Audrey Moate. Audrey was born on the 24th of November 1925 in Colorado to Minnie and Daniel Smith. She married her husband George Moate during World War II while he was serving in the Navy. They had two children together, a girl named Decky and a boy named George, but would divorce in 1954. Being a divorced single mother in the 1950s would have been very difficult, even for a strong independent woman like Audrey was described as being. Thankfully, she had the unwavering support of her mother and the two lived together in 2621 McGrath Street in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Audrey and Minnie only had each other left and they were very close. Audrey's father died in 1946 and her brother Henry died the following year after killing his wife of 2 months, then taking his own life. Determined not to let her past define her future, Audrey started working at a local chemical company called Celotex and began studying to become an engineer. That's where she met Thomas Hotard, a 46-year-old married man with 2 children. After a strike at the company led to Audrey losing her job, she moved in with the Hotards, a decision that Thomas's wife Beulah would later come to regret. She told a local paper, quote, "She never helped me in any way, not even with the dishes. She hated housework and was always around Tom. If he was working on his motorboat or reading or anything, there she was. She knew it was causing tension between us. She wasn't at all attractive, but she was intelligent and seemed well educated and had a way of twisting people round her finger. I hated her." Unquote. She said that there was nothing going on between Thomas and Audrey, but Thomas, quote, "didn't see the bad in anyone," unquote. It's unknown whether Beulah was in denial about the affair or genuinely didn't know, but the pair had been seeing each other for years. Every Saturday, Audrey and Thomas, under the guise of going to work, would sneak off to Frenier Beach at Lake Pontchartrain, where they would make love in the back of his car. Interestingly, in July 1955, Audrey spent 5 months in St. Louis after allegedly having a nervous breakdown. Not much is known about her time there, but when she returned on the 23rd of December that same year, she was not alone. She had a 4-day-old girl with her. She claimed that she adopted the baby as her parents didn't want her, and she named her Jacqueline. Thomas sponsored this so-called adoption and even allowed Audrey and Jacqueline to have his last name for legal purposes. Audrey had moved back in with her mother after Jacqueline's birth, but was very thankful for all of Thomas's help, saying, quote, "I tell you, Mr. Hotard was certainly good with that baby. Why, he took as good care of it as though it were his own, always bringing gifts for Audrey and Jacqueline." Unquote. So, are we to believe that a divorced single woman with 2 kids voluntarily adopted a 3rd child after having some sort of mental break, and no one questioned this? The more likely scenario is that Thomas got Audrey pregnant, and not wanting to expose the affair or suffer the stigma of having a child outside of wedlock, they concocted the adoption tale. It's unknown if Minnie knew about Jacqueline's parentage, however I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't want her family being at the centre of another scandal and was in on the whole thing. After Jacqueline's adoption, life went on as normal. Audrey got a job at the Kaiser Construction Company in Gramercy, and Audrey and Thomas would continue their affair, up until Audrey's 31st birthday, when the pair would seek off for a secret rendezvous one final time. Neither of them would be seen alive again. On the 24th of November 1956, Audrey left her home at 7:30 a.m. and drove to a service station where Thomas picked her up. They then drove to Frenier Beach, over 55 miles away. This was their usual Saturday routine, and Audrey was likely excited to be able to spend her birthday with Thomas in their lover's lane. At 10:30 a.m, a hunter and his son saw Thomas's blue 4-door sedan parked 5 yards from the water and decided to take a closer look. Audrey and Thomas anxiously peeked out the window upon hearing the 2 men approaching the car. Once the men realised what Audrey and Thomas were doing, they, quote, backtracked in embarrassed haste, unquote, and continued on. 3 hours later, they passed the car again. This time, they saw the front seats were reclined to form a bed of sorts, and although Thomas was sleeping in an awkward position, nothing else unusual was noted. They returned the next day and saw that the car was still there in the exact same spot. The father and son thought this was rather unusual and went to investigate. That's when they found Thomas dead from a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. Police arrived on the scene to find documents belonging to an Audrey A. Hotard lying on the beach. Inside, they found Audrey's clothing, all but a bra and a slip. Thomas was also, quote, clad in shorts, unquote, and police believed he was shot while engaging in intercourse. There was a small hole on the rear passenger window, meaning that the shooter had pressed the gun against the window as they shot Thomas. They also discovered Audrey's work ID, her car key, and other items presumably from her handbag, although this has never been found. Alongside where the items were scattered were 2 sets of footprints. One was from bare feet, thought to be a woman's due to the size, and police deduced that the woman had been running from the car given the space between each footprint. The other set of prints were from a man's boot, and it seems to follow the same direction as the woman's footprints. Both trails ended at the road that would take you onto the highway. On this road, police found a single tyre track, similar to that of a motorcycle, and on a nearby bush was a bright plaid piece of fabric that had likely come from a shirt. Police initially thought Audrey was Thomas's wife until they went to his house and had to break the news to Beulah that her husband would not be coming home. 200 National Guardsmen, the Coast Guard and State Police observation planes were all on the lookout for Audrey, but to no avail. Police thought that if she had died in the nearby lake, her body would wash up within 7 days due to the temperature of the water, but the local coroner said that this was not true, as many factors determine if or when a body in water will rise to the surface. All nearby police stations were told to be on the lookout for her, and there was a lot of police officers on the case that thought she was possibly alive somewhere. A, quote, prominent New Orleans lawyer, unquote, who wished to remain anonymous, said that he believed he saw Audrey leaving the scene of the crime. He said that on the Saturday the pair were last seen, he saw a woman on board a stationary boat on that same lake. He said it caught his attention as the woman seemed to be huddled up as if she was cold, and the man on the boat with her was sitting very still. In fact, they both were. They did not look like they were fishing or travelling anywhere in particular. The boat was just drifting on the water. Police received another tip from a waitress in a cafe, who said a dishevelled woman who looked strikingly similar to Audrey had come into the restaurant where she worked. The woman ordered a coffee and a donut, but as she saw the waitress staring at her, the woman left in a hurry. I was unable to find out exactly where this cafe was or when the waitress saw this woman, but the sighting has never been confirmed as being Audrey, as they did not have enough evidence to track this woman down. Another woman claimed that Audrey contacted her to rent a room from her, but again I was unable to find out any more information about this alleged sighting. There are no other reported sightings of Audrey that I could find out about. However, on the 6th of December, 11 days after the murder, Audrey's former mother-in-law Lee received a call from a woman claiming to be Audrey. She said that she needed help and that she was in big trouble. The line went dead before Audrey was able to reveal where she was. Lee was convinced that the voice she heard was Audrey's, citing her unusual accent. Audrey had moved a lot in her life, living in Colorado, Oregon, California, St. Louis, as well as Louisiana at various times during her life. Her ex-mother-in-law said, quote, "I would know that accent anywhere," unquote. There is a chance this could have been a hoax, but as her ex-mother-in-law lived over an hour away, people might not have connected her as being related in any way to Audrey. Also, this was the 50s. People's personal information was not as accessible then as it is now. This person either knew Lee's phone number or would have had to look it up in a phone book. If the woman was Audrey, why would she have contacted Lee and not her own mother? Well, Audrey did remain close with her ex-in-laws and would visit Lee monthly. Also, if Audrey was in the area where her ex-mother-in-law lived, she might have only had enough money to make a local call. Due to the technology back in the 1950s, this call could not be traced and this lead went cold. It was when police started to look into Audrey and Thomas's personal life that they discovered that they had been romantically involved for around 2 years. Nobody claimed to know about the affair, not even Audrey's mother Minnie, who said that Thomas was just, quote, helping her with her studies, unquote. Someone had to know about this affair for them to know that they went to the same place every Saturday for 2 years. How do the police know that just because they went to Frenier Beach that particular Saturday, that that's where they went every Saturday? Also, it's likely they picked that spot because it was out of the way and didn't have a lot of foot traffic. So it's unlikely that people saw them there enough times to say that that's where they had been going for all these years. When police searched for clues at her work, they found a note written to Audrey. The full contents of the note have never been released, but police claim it is rather boring and there is nothing unusual about the letter until the end, where it reads, quote, "I'll deal with you later, fathead," unquote. Police never figured out who this letter was from or why they referred to themselves this way, but it is possible that the person just had a quirky sense of humour, as police did not say the note was threatening. In fact, far from it. Police also learned that Audrey had a safety deposit box, but due to a bizarre legal technicality, they were unable to access it. The box was in Audrey's name, but the only person she had given permission to access it was Thomas, quote, "just in case anything happens to me," unquote. Now, although this may sound quite ominous, I don't think this safety deposit box holds as many answers as the police seem to think it did back then. The way police were talking about the safety deposit box in newspaper articles I was able to source, they were making it sound as if Audrey had somehow solved her own disappearance and all the answers would be in this box. Think about it, a box only Thomas could access in case anything happened to Audrey. I think it's highly possible that the box contained documentation related to their youngest daughter, the one that was said to be adopted but was most likely the result of their love affair. The box probably contained her birth certificate and other paperwork Thomas would need to gain custody of her, just in case Audrey died young. The reason it would have been kept so secretive is they wouldn't want anyone to stumble across this paperwork, realise that Thomas was Jacqueline's father, and reveal their affair. But what about her saying, "if anything happens to me"? Well, as a parent myself, I have had to have a lot of those types of conversations with my loved ones. Not because I think anything is going to happen to me anytime soon, but because when you're a parent, you do have to put provisions in place just in case the worst case scenario happens. Audrey probably knew that her ex-husband would take custody of her first 2 children, but she had to make extra arrangements for Jacqueline. I don't think this proves she was in fear of her life. I think it's smart and sensible. I I might be totally wrong here, maybe this box contains something else, but we're never going to know as police didn't seem to put a lot of effort into containing it. That weird legal technicality I mentioned earlier is that because police could not prove Audrey was dead, the bank would not open the box for them. If the box had been in Thomas's name, different story. He was a murder victim, therefore any of his personal belongings would be fair game for police to search through, but it wasn't his. He was just named as someone allowed to access the box. Have the police officers in this case ever heard of a warrant? Audrey was either a kidnapped woman or she was part of the plot to kill Thomas. Either way, she's a big part of this investigation and I don't think it would have been too difficult to get a warrant for this box. Granted, the laws have changed a lot since 1956, but in the newspaper article, it didn't seem as though they'd applied for a warrant, although I might be wrong there too. According to her daughter Decky, who posted on a web sleuths forum, Audrey told her mother that if anything happened to her, she should take the kids and move out of town. This does sound more like Audrey was fearful of something happening to her, but without knowing more about this conversation between Audrey and Minnie, it's impossible to tell if she was in imminent danger or having one of those if the worst happens kind of conversations. Now let's get to the theories, of which there are plenty. The first was presented to police by a man who claimed to have been present when Audrey and Thomas were murdered. Jackson Lujan said that a, quote, certain man, unquote, he had known for around 5 years, invited him out for a drink the night that Audrey and Thomas were killed. He said that he was in this man's car when he saw Audrey enter Thomas's sedan. The man gritted his teeth and said, quote, that's her, unquote, and followed the blue sedan to Frenier Beach. Once there, the man got out of the car, shot Thomas, had a brief scuffle with Audrey before putting her in the boot of his car. They drove to some nearby woods, where the man dragged Audrey out of the car, shot her, and buried her body. Jackson said this happened late at night, and by the time the man re-entered the car after burying Audrey, it was daylight. He told Jackson that if he told anybody, he was dead, and Jackson was so scared that he moved to Texas the next day, a fact that his landlady confirmed. Police did not take the man seriously and said he was, quote, a victim of delusion, unquote. There are a lot of things about this man's story that don't quite line up with the evidence. We don't know exactly what time Thomas was shot, however we know that he met Audrey that morning, not at night time like the man said. Also, Thomas's car was not where the man said it had been, and he was not able to show police where Audrey's body was. The man Jackson accused was questioned, but there was no evidence to prove that he knew either Audrey or Thomas, and this lead came to a dead end. Although this would not be the only confession in this case. A man called Ernest Acosta called his daughter Melvina from his deathbed in 1981, and he told her that his common-law wife Caroline, who had died the year before, had killed both Audrey and Thomas, and he had helped dispose of the bodies. He said that Caroline killed both Audrey and Thomas in their home, moved Thomas's body to his car, and had kept Audrey's body in an iron box until police stopped searching the area. She then put the box in a cannon and dumped the cannon in a local swamp. While he never mentioned a motive, there is speculation that Caroline and Audrey were distantly related and that she and Thomas had visited their home twice in the weeks before the murder, so it's possible the couples knew each other. Police took this confession far more seriously, as Ernest and Caroline lived less than a mile away from the crime scene. According to Robin from the Trail Went Cold podcast, soon after the murder, police did question a 58-year-old man who only lived 100 feet from the beach in connection with this murder. Ernest Acosta would have been around this age at the time of the murder. However, even if he was the man police were speaking to, it might have been because he was a potential witness given how close his house was to the crime scene. There was a lot of inconsistencies in his story though. We know that Thomas was actually killed in his car due to the amount of blood at the scene and the gun-sized hole in the rear passenger window. People seem to think that these discrepancies mean that Ernest killed the pair on his own, but I disagree. If you killed someone and wanted to make it look like someone else did it, why would you lie about these details? Wouldn't you want to make your story sound as believable as possible? Detective Norwood believes Ernest knew about the affair after seeing the couple having sex in that spot over the last few years. He speculates that Ernest killed Thomas because he wanted to rape Audrey and then tossed her body into the swamp after killing her. Detective Norwood claimed that Ernest, who was said to be, quote, a pretty rough guy, unquote, wanted to get it off his chest before he died. But if that's the case, why lie? Surely if you wanted to confess on your deathbed, you would tell the truth and not blame it on your dead girlfriend. Detective Norwood is convinced that Ernest is responsible and that Audrey is in a cannon in a swamp near his house. He said that he's been meaning to go back to search for her, but just hasn't gotten around to it. Yeah, just whenever you get around to, putting it on your to-do list. Beulah was never considered a suspect in Audrey's disappearance or her husband's murder. She reportedly, quote, went berserk, unquote, when she found out her husband had been killed, and police just took her word for it that she didn't know about the affair. It was almost as though the police's attitude was, well, why would a stupid little woman know what her husband was doing in his spare time? She has the most obvious motive in my opinion, and I'm not saying that she didn't know about the affair, just that I don't think the police looked into this enough. Audrey's ex-husband George was ruled out rather quickly as well, although I do understand this a little bit better. He had already remarried before Audrey's death and their relationship seemed amicable. I don't know if Audrey was seeing Thomas while she was married to George or why they divorced, but as they had split up years earlier and had both moved on, I'm not sure what his motive would have been. Now, I just want to talk about some facts in this case that really stuck out to me. First of all sources I have read seem to skim past the fact that motorcycle tracks, or tracks similar, were found at that scene. These same sources imply that Audrey was kidnapped after struggling with her attacker. Totally possible this is what happened. I think it's a strong possibility that Audrey is a victim in this case and that she was murdered that day, but it's the motorcycle tracks that get to me. How the hell are you managing to kidnap someone and put them on the back of your motorcycle? I think that if a motorcycle was involved in this case, it's likely that Audrey would have got onto it willingly. Now, I might be totally wrong here, please let me know your thoughts on this. It's just something that struck me as really odd as I was reading about this case. Also, when police started investigating this case, they were very open to the possibility that Audrey was still alive. However, it's unclear if they thought she was alive and being held hostage, or if she was somehow involved in Thomas's murder. I don't think there's enough evidence here to prove that Audrey was an accomplice in Thomas's murder. And I think it's more likely than not that she was a victim in this case, because I'm not sure what her motive would be for killing Thomas. However, where is her purse? As we mentioned earlier in the episode, most of the items that would have been in her purse were scattered alongside or near the car, which suggests to me that she was either in a struggle for her purse or she was running and these items fell out. However, if she was in a struggle and fearful for her life after seeing Thomas being shot, why would she even take her purse? Why would she reach for it and try to run away with her purse when she didn't even have clothes on? Now, this fact has led some to believe that Audrey was somehow complicit in the murder. However, I think it's more likely that Audrey was the intended victim. Detective Norwood said that to get to where Thomas's car was parked, you'd have to drive a mile down the road off the highway. As I said earlier, it doesn't seem like a place that would have a lot of foot traffic, which is probably why Audrey and Thomas liked it there so much. But that also suggests to me that this wasn't a random attack. Someone deliberately followed them, watched them, and sought them out, which makes me believe that there was a personal motive. Also, why was Audrey not killed at the scene in the same way that Thomas was? If Thomas's killer then went on to kidnap Audrey, why? It's very possible this was a sexually motivated attack, but I believe that whoever did this knew that Audrey and Thomas would be there that day. I don't think they randomly would have come across them in such a derelict part of this beach. Another thing I wanted to talk about was that one newspaper article described Audrey as, quote, a woman a man wouldn't look twice at, unquote. Charming. This is a horrible thing to say about anybody because women's worth is not based on their looks, and the only reason I'm bringing it up is because of the photos I was able to find of Audrey online. From what I was able to find, there's only 2 photos of Audrey publicly available, but they do not look at all like the same person. They look so different that I'm actually questioning if they are indeed both of Audrey. I'm probably totally wrong here. It's very possible there was a long time between each of these photos being taken. I just wanted to mention it because I didn't see anyone else bringing this up during my research. If anyone listening to this episode has more personal knowledge on Audrey or of these photos, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Finally, daughters Audrey Decky has submitted her DNA to police in case they do find Audrey's body and can make a familial DNA match. However, Audrey's details have not been submitted to NamUs. Just in case you don't know, NamUs stands for the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, and it's a database that holds information on Jane and John Does and missing people. When you submit a case to NamUs, police do have to verify it before it goes live, and they can submit DNA onto the NamUs system in the hope that they will get a match between the missing person and the Jane or John Doe. Right after I finish recording this episode, I am going to submit Audrey's case to NamUs, and I will let you know if it gets approved. I have looked through all the Jane Does found in Louisiana, and while none of them stick out to me as possibly being Audrey, there are some where decomposition was too advanced to even make a facial reconstruction. So it's very possible her remains have been found but just haven't been matched to her case yet. If you're interested in learning more about Audrey and Thomas's case, I highly recommend reading the Web Sleuths forum on this case, as there is some theories there that I haven't delved into in this episode. Mainly the fact that there is speculation that the two hunters that found Thomas's body are actually related to Thomas's wife Beulah. Audrey's daughter Decky, as well as the daughter of Audrey's third child Jacqueline, both comment on the Web Sleuths forum, so I highly recommend reading it. It will be linked in the description of this episode. After Audrey's disappearance, her daughter Decky and son George went to live with her ex-husband. Decky went on to have children of her own but never stopped looking for her mother. She sadly contracted hepatitis through a blood transfusion, then went on to contract liver cancer and sadly died on the 21st of January 2019, aged 71. Audrey's other daughter Jacqueline was raised by distant relatives and grew up in Florida. Audrey's mother Minnie was convinced up until the day she died that her daughter was still alive. After Audrey's disappearance, she moved to Oregon to live with her sister, but still posted her change of address in the newspaper, quote, "so Audrey will know where I am," unquote. She died in 1986. Audrey was a Caucasian female, had blonde hair, grey eyes, stood at 5'1" tall, weighed 105 pounds and wore glasses. If you have any information on her case, please call St John the Baptist Parish Sheriff's Office on 985-652-95. All pictures and sources related to this case can be found on our blog at uncovertruecrimepodcast.blogspot.com. Also, please remember to check out the Sooner State Crime podcast. Their episodes are really, really good, and if you like this podcast, you certainly will like theirs. That is everything I have for you today. Thank you for listening till the very end. Please stay safe and have a good night.